Well, we are back for another episode of the HTMA View, and we're going to dive into a topic today that might be near and dear to your heart, or that you've been diving into rabbit holes about as well. So again, welcome back, Katie, Ryan, Sheila, Vanessa, and Tara for the show today, and of course, I'm Lisa. So today we're going to talk about supplements versus whole foods. And I'm going to let Sheila kick this one off because I think a lot of times we get questions about, when we're mineral balancing, we're doing that with supplements, right? We're doing that with specific things. And a lot of times it's like, well, why can't I just change my diet and be able to change my mineral pattern that way? And I think we can all agree that diet is a big part of mineral balancing, right? When we're lacking potassium and sodium, we need sea salt, we need potassium foods, beverages, things like that. But there's also something else to consider. So Sheila, kick it off for us.
Thank you. Yeah, and I often get too, and maybe you guys as well, but clients say, well, I eat a healthy diet, I don't need to take supplements. But what we need to understand is clinical studies have confirmed significant decline in magnesium and potassium, especially in the nutrients in our staple foods. So even if you are eating healthy, we're getting a significant reduction from just 50 years ago, and notably too, calcium and iron and phosphorus, B2, vitamin C, many more. And they've actually, we have clinical studies testing the nutrient density in our vegetables and our fruits, and we can see it clearly that due to soil depletion, synthetic fertilizers, crop breeding for size and yield, not nutrition, longer storage and transportation, reducing freshness and nutrient retention. So, we do have to think about these things that we might not have had to think about 50 or 100 years ago, when most people were growing food and it was the crops were smaller. But now with over agriculture, we're living in a different time.
Yeah. I was shocked actually when I discovered quite a few years ago how long produce stays in storage before they have like very carefully controlled temperature storage. And you might be eating apples or bananas if they've been imported from another country that have been sitting for months before it comes to you. And what does that do to the nutrients? And I often get asked by clients or, just generally, people asking, well, why can't we just get enough nutrients from our food? And as Sheila said, it's just not. My answer is always, you would have to eat so much more food to get the same nutrients that you got 50 years ago that you would put on a lot of weight because you couldn't eat that amount of food. Yeah.
And even the dosing, like I was telling someone a few weeks ago, like I said, how are you going to get 20 milligrams of zinc? Are you going to eat 2 cups of pumpkin seeds a day? Like, that's not right.
Yeah,
like it's
not, it's like 8 servings.
Yeah, like the therapeutic doses that we might be recommending to balance people's minerals, depending on what we're seeing. It would be pretty hard to achieve that with food.
Yeah, I think that we all can, in our space, in our little, holistic group, we just kind of assume that we're all eating organic as much as possible. But I think an important factor to bring up is the GMO situation. Sheila, when you began talking, I'm like, oh my gosh, I did a post in 2020, so I just brought it up. And it's just a comparison between non-GMO corn and GMO corn of the calcium, magnesium, and manganese content. So GMO corn had 14 parts per million of calcium, where non-GMO corn had 6,130 parts per million. That's 437 times more calcium in standard, regular, non-GMO corn. And this isn't even organic, but I mean, it's like the only way you're getting GMO nowadays, especially with corn, is if it is organic, right? And the magnesium, I mean, this is the saddest ever because it's like, magnesium is involved in everything. GMO corn, 2 parts per million, non-GMO, 113 parts per million. So 56 times more magnesium in non-GMO corn. And then manganese is 2 parts per million in GMO and 14 parts per million. So that's a 7 times more manganese in non-GMO, and it's just like
I didn't even know that. I actually
grief.
had heard that the nutrient density was the same, but we just had the chemicals and the GMO. But that's really interesting. So
Oh
you're
yeah, no, it's
yeah.
I think I cited the research article in this post. I won't read it, and I don't remember it because it was in 2020 that I did that, but my mind melted because, here we are going down this mineral balancing journey, and, we're having to just largely make up for what we don't get in our diet. And that doesn't even include stress, which is heavily depleting us. But our diets are depleting us because it's like these are the seeds that they're putting in the ground in soil that is awful. Are the seeds themselves don't have the capability to provide us with the proper nutrients or combination and ratio of nutrients that our bodies need. So it's just like, I think heavens for supplementation, because where would we be?
Yeah. Well, then we think about too, all the people that come to see us, or all the HTMAs we see from people that are eating healthy diets, that are eating locally organic, and they're severely depleted.
Right.
And then you think about actually Rhonda Patrick did a really good podcast on this last year or 2 years ago, that like across the board, like over 50% of the US population is deficient in magnesium. And then we all know too how hard it is to get enough potassium in our diets. And I remember when I first started my health journey like 15 years ago, tracking in my fitness pal, like I would track all my food to get my macros and my nutrients. And it didn't matter how well I ate, I never hit my RDA for potassium, and it's no wonder I was always deficient in it. So, I mean, yeah, we can eat really healthy. It's depleted, and we're seeing it, and it's just hard to get these nutrients now.
Yeah. Well, I talked to a mom just 3 days ago, and their diet was gluten-free, dairy-free. She's like, Katie, it is 98, 99% organic. She was trying to get to the bottom of some of his issues. So she's like, we don't go anywhere. We only eat at home. I make everything from scratch. And I'm listening to this diet thinking like, I wish someone would cook like this for me. Like this little guy is so lucky. And she's like, and he was in 4 lows. So she's like, can we do this with food? And I'm like, well, like you're doing all you can. I'm like, this is probably like the best diet he could be on. He was, protein, like chicken and meat. Like he had an amazing diet, but he was in 4 lows. So I said, look at where you are, and he's in 4 lows. I don't think continuing what you're doing is going to get you out. Like if this is where you are and this is what you're doing, you need a little bit more. And then hopefully you get to a point where, once his body is able to get to that level, maybe rely a little bit less on the supplementation and more on the food, but like you got to get out of where you are, and you can't get out by doing the same things that you've been doing. So it was really, I think, eye-opening for her, like to see, she's like, I can't believe he's in 4 lows with how we eat as a family.
Yeah.
So
well, I
it's
always think
crazy.
about it too, because, a lot of times we are using therapeutic dosing, right? Regardless of the pattern, we're usually isolating certain things at different levels. And even if you're trying to use concentrates or extracts that are from food sources, there's really 2 things to consider that I always think about. And it's even, we talk about iodine. I know it's controversial, but just as a base example, it's like to get the amount of Lugol's that we might recommend, you'd have to eat grams and grams and grams and grams of kelp every day, right? Like, and that kelp is going to have some form or some level of heavy metals, because it would be impossible for it not to. It grows in an environment that is exposed, right? All of our food is exposed. And so when we think about that aspect of things, it's hard to control what you're getting, right? Because kelp has other nutrients, not just iodine, right? And so that might go against what we're actually trying to do as well, and then also expose bodies to more metals and toxins and things like that as well.
Well, then the whole digestive aspect too, because with the GMO or glyphosate and leaky gut, people coming to us all the time with low stomach acid, they're on proton pump inhibitors, everything that makes it even harder for them to extract and break down and extract the nutrients to absorb. So you have multiple levels of interference for the body to get that. So our food is depleted, and then people's digestion is suffering, so they're not able to absorb those nutrients as well.
Therapeutic doses in times when people are really depleted, and then once they build up the reserves, then there might be less needed in terms of supplements. But I think there's always going to be a need for supplements, and we're based on everything we just said.
Well, yeah, and I think that comes back around to, even thinking about athletes, right? We talk about this sometimes where, when we're demanding that level of recovery and repair from our body and energy expenditure from our body, supplementation can make a critical change in performance, athletic performance, right? I would be hard pressed for someone to show me an athlete that isn't taking a multiple different supplements to support, the training and the competing and things that they're doing, right? So when we think about that, and I always have a giggle because people will be like, well, I'm not an athlete. But you know what? We're all athletes in some extent, right? Every day is a marathon for some of us, right? I feel like everybody, we're running on our phone and work and kids and all the things. Like, that's a marathon every day that people are running, and they don't understand the toll that can take on them, and how a little bit of strategic supplementation might be able to really help their day-to-day life and have the energy that they need.
Yeah. Sometimes people think that they are being strategic with their supplementation, but the supplementation itself is food-based. Like with our vitamin C, like camu, or liver organ meat, even just getting our ground beef with that ancestral blend with some with some organ meat in there, which is so fantastic when you think about it. Wow, look at all these nutrients I'm getting. But like, what is the percentage of people that we're dealing with that have buried copper, like an accumulation of copper that is driving so many of their symptoms? In my world, the fertility optimization, it's almost everyone. And yet they're like, well, I'm doing all the things, I read on Instagram, take beef liver, and then I'm doing all the ancestral blend ground beef. I'm like, oh, hard stop. Hard stop. Because we need to limit the amount of copper that's coming into the system, which this also is controversial because of how different practitioners view the impact of what copper has on the body. Like biounavailable copper, not needed. Bioavailable copper, yes, we know it's needed, but like when you're combining the two, like you get an accumulation and you're just like, well, great, a symptom tornado. But yeah, considering the effects that just those, targeted supplementations that there are, or people like are considering that it's a targeted supplementation when really this is food-based. It's got so many things in it, but we have to look at you as a bio individual human. Like, what are your labs saying? What should we not be pouring onto this fire? And so we see that a lot with the zinc and with the copper, both really great in a vacuum, but we're not vacuums. And with the camu, like we love food-based vitamin C, but we know that, the impact, and Lisa, I think that you should speak to this because I'll butcher it, but the impact that ascorbic acid is going to have on the adrenals that we need, because we need to do some really hard things that are going to, so first we need to build up those adrenals. Ascorbic acid is a really helpful piece of that puzzle. But camu is a vitamin C complex, and, the ascorbic acid is just on like that outside shell. But if we put enough camu into a formulation or a supplement protocol, like we are now getting with it all of the things that come along with the food-based stuff, like, the elements in the world that are exposed. But if you want to expound on like why it's important to do the whole therapeutic doses of that specific part of the vitamin C complex, ascorbic acid, I think that would be helpful. But yeah, so again, targeting, whereas we think we are because we're taking camu and it's this food-based thing and it's a supplement, but are we really doing our body the biggest benefit, or are we can it be a drawback and hit pause on our healing?
Yeah, I think it can come from both perspectives, and I think it's very similar to the example I gave with iodine and kelp, right? Same thing. So when we look at it that way, it really depends on what you're targeting, right? That's the biggest thing. And when we're doing mineral balancing, because we're using a very strategic approach based on the data that we're getting from the hair itself to tell us what the body really needs. And you know, Ryan, it's interesting you mentioned that podcast, and only 50%, I'll say North America I think it's like 100%.
Yeah.
Right? Because even when we don't think we're stressed, like I that's one of the reasons why I think the sodium to potassium ratio is one of the most important, because it talks about the stress that people may not feel, but it tells us a different story, right? Because as soon as that ratio starts changing, somebody might not feel stressed, but our EMFs that are hitting us, the environmental toxins that are hitting us, and you know, maybe the internal stressors that are bothering us, but maybe they're not producing a ton of symptoms, that's all stress that our body is dealing with, and we might not even feel it or realize it. And that's eating up our nutrients, right? Our micronutrients. And that includes all of our minerals. And we all know how important magnesium is. Yeah. So I'd be hard pressed to think it's 50%. I feel like it's way higher than that.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, and I
then
think
we
we don't. Oh, sorry.
go ahead,
Ryan.
Katie.
Oh, I
go
was
ahead.
just going to say, we don't want to discount a diet as well, like a healthy diet as well,
100%.
because we're certainly not suggesting that you're going to take your supplements and then go eat your fast food every day. And your junk. It kind of goes hand in hand. Yeah, go ahead, Ryan. Sorry.
Then we have to think about too, like if we're not getting enough of the nutrients, specifically coming back to what Lisa was talking about with magnesium, we know how big of an impact magnesium plays in vitamin D. And we see people that have low vitamin D all over the place, and they could be supplementing with vitamin D, but they're not increasing, but they're actually really low in magnesium. And so their body can't use it. So there's just all these interconnected relationships with everything. And so, you know, there's just so many things that we need to think about in that regard.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, you can't out supplement a bad diet, right? You can't take a handful of supplements or a supplement that has a whole bunch of stuff in it and be like, I'm going to go eat McDonald's and I'm going to be amazing. No, it doesn't work that way.
I wish you could.
Right?
That'd be nice.
Doesn't work that way. You've got to have the diet too. I always use the 80-20 rule, right? We want to have a little, like if you want to have your ice cream or, you know, whatever that, you know, sweet tooth or whatever a person has. I mean, 80-20 is always a good, manageable lifestyle way to do nutrition. But yeah, clean nutrition is super important too. So hopefully that puts a little bit more light on something that I think is sometimes a bit controversial. People are on one side or the other, and really you've got to land somewhere in the middle, right? You've got to know that diet's important. You've got to know that nutrition is important, what you're providing to the body for the body to use, but also upregulating that with supplements can be super helpful, especially if you're using HTMA to know what your body needs, rather than saying, oh, you know, I saw this ad on Instagram and NAD, and I'm going to start taking this because I think that's what I need. You know, this is one of the reasons why we love HTMA. So thanks for joining us. Another episode of the HTMA View, and we'll be back at you soon.